Hi, and welcome to Missed It by How Much. This is the channel that tests sports hypotheses by using computer game engines. We're using the Action PC Baseball game to test if the Dodgers in 1990 could win the National League West without Alfredo Griffin as our shortstop. We've played 5/6 of the season. There are approximately 27 games to go, and we're going to review what has happened. But first, in the last video that I made, talked about the September 1st cutdown date. My initial goal was to see which players teams would keep on the 40-man roster and which they would not have active, and those players would be cut in a way that made it fair for teams that didn't even have 40 players on their roster. And here's a list of those players here that were not left active after the 40-man roster. Cut downs. And my initial goal was to just delete these players, and that would be the end of that. But upon further reflection, I thought I've really enjoyed playing this 1990 season, win or lose, and I think I want to try the 1991 season after that, if that's possible, if that happens. And I'm going to up the injury quotient from 2 weeks as a maximum injury to at least a month. And with no notable minor leagues other than just the players on the reserve roster, teams might need these players back. Also, we have some notable names here that were cut, like Jeff Conine. I don't know how many of you know about Jeff, but here's some of his stats on Baseball Reference. He hit over 200 home runs in his career and had a batting average over 280. So he was a great player. He just didn't play very much in the 1990 season. In fact, he didn't come back until 92. And he did very well, including a season of 26 home runs for the Florida Marlins in 1996. Made the All-Star team a couple times. And I just felt bad about deleting those from the history of baseball. These players, also Steve Lombardozzi. There's a couple players on here that at least I've heard of. So what I'm going to do instead of deleting them is I'm going to return them back to their original teams after this video and let the computer choose who's active and who's not. And at the end of the season, if we go on and play a 1991 season on this channel, those players will be with the teams that they were in 1990, and we'll see who the computer chooses to keep on their roster. So, a reversal there, just a note. Here are the current standings. I played one game on September 5th while we watched simulation, and the Giants have won, so they're at 136 games, and they're 4.5 back, but everybody else has not played. In the American League West, Oakland is 2 back, or leads Minnesota by 2 games, which is a big lead over Minnesota since Minnesota's been in first place most of the season. Kansas City is 4.5 back, Seattle 9.5 back. The rest are not worth mentioning. Boston leads in the East by only a game over the Orioles, a game and a half over Toronto, 2.5 over Detroit. Cleveland, Milwaukee, farther back. Not impossible, but very difficult. In the National League East, Pittsburgh has a new chaser. Instead of the Mets, who've fallen 3.5 back, Montreal is now only 2 back. And in the West, Houston at 7 behind the Dodgers, and San Francisco at 4.5, currently with games to be played on September 5th. Today's video will be a little bit shorter. I'm not going to drag it out or break it into 4 different videos. We're just going to take a look at the teams that are left in the races and maybe look at what type of schedule remains for each team. So we'll start with Boston. Once their stats load, looks like Ellis Burks leads them in home runs with 21. Wade Boggs with 48 doubles, still chasing 60. Looks like a long shot though, with about 27 games to play. They're currently in a 2-game losing streak against Oakland. Let's take a look at what they have left to play. Still have a game with Oakland, Seattle. Milwaukee should be fairly well, I mean, these teams, anybody can win any game, but that's not a first place team. Chicago's lower. Baltimore, they have a big series in the middle of September. New York is in last place. I have this odd game because of the lockout. 1-game series at Detroit. And then 3 big games at home against Toronto. So that's how they look. Let's go to Baltimore. They've played 135 games. Cal Ripken has played 135 games. So he's still on his streak. They've currently lost 4 games between Milwaukee and Seattle. Take a look at their schedule the rest of the way. Seattle, California, Detroit. That'll be a big matchup. At Toronto for 4. Seems tough. Then they have the games against Boston we talked about. Milwaukee, New York, Cleveland. That's a nice stretch for them if they can play their normal. And then they end with 3 against Toronto at home. Very interesting there. Toronto. So they've been under 500 in their last 13 games, including 3 of the last 4 they've lost. 2 in a row against Detroit. Let's see what their schedule looks like down the road. Chicago at Kansas City, who's played well. They got Baltimore, New York, Cleveland, Milwaukee. Look at this end of the schedule for them. 3 against Boston on the road and 3 against Baltimore, including the 3 against Milwaukee. All on the road, their last 9 games. That will be difficult, especially coming from behind. Last in that American League East is Detroit. A surprising, excellent job by Sparky Anderson. They've lost 3 out of 4, although they did beat Toronto the last game. They have another game against Toronto, then 1 against Cleveland at home, then 6 against Milwaukee and at Baltimore. That'll be important. New York, California is, if not in last place, they're close to it. 3 at Oakland. That looks difficult. Seattle, 1 game against Boston at home. They play 3 against Minnesota towards the end, and then in the last series they go on the road for 3 at New York. That's not a horrible schedule. Detroit does have a chance. I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Let's go to the American League West. There's the Oakland A's. Their talented lineup. They have been hot. They've won 3 of their last 4. They've won 6 of their last 7, including 2 in a row at Boston. That's impressive. Take a look. They play 3 at New York, 3 at Seattle. Then they come home to play Minnesota for 4. That'll be a big series. Chicago, Detroit, at Kansas City, at Texas for 4, at California. I have to say that's pretty easy compared to the schedules we've seen. Let's take a look at Minnesota. 2 games back. They've been up there the whole season. They had a huge losing streak right here. I'm counting 6 in a row. That hurts. And that's kind of something I'll be talking about with the Dodgers, is you got to avoid those losing streaks. More than you have to win a big, long winning streak. They got 3 against Cleveland at home, 3 against California, then that big 4-game set at Oakland. And some home games against Kansas City, Texas, Chicago, at Detroit, and then 3 against Seattle at home to end the campaign. Kansas City is the other contender in the West. Again, I will say I love this pennant race versus, just saying, hey, we got all these wild cards. These are guys would already be in, and it would just be jockeying for playoff position. But these games mean the difference between playing in the playoffs and not. They had a 4-game losing streak recently. Let's see the rest of their schedule. At Texas, that shouldn't be too difficult. Toronto at home. Cleveland, Minnesota, California, Oakland. 4 more with California. And they end the season with 2 at Cleveland. That is a really nice schedule. So don't count them out. They'll have to play really well, but these 3 games at Oakland could be important towards the end of the season. All right, National League. The Pittsburgh Pirates lead in the National League East. Not unexpected there. They've won 8 of their last 13. They have a series against the Mets coming up at home. Montreal. Those are big games. Then at Philadelphia, at Montreal, at Chicago, St. Louis for 3, Chicago for 3, at St. Louis, and then the last series of the season is at home against New York. So that looks pretty good. I mean, I would say they're the favorite. Montreal, although would disagree. They're very close. 12 games over 500, it looks like. Montreal, the only thing I worry about them is their hitting. They hit well against the Dodgers, but their pitching is just outstanding. And this is why they've moved past the Mets and into second place. I believe that's 7 in a row. That's impressive. And they swept the series against us at home. So let's see what their remaining schedule looks like. At St. Louis, that shouldn't be too difficult. At Pittsburgh will be. At Chicago, more St. Louis. At home for Pittsburgh, that could be a really big series. Then they go on the road. 3 in New York and 4 in Philadelphia. Then they come home for 3 against New York and 3 against Philadelphia in the end of the season with St. Louis. So if it comes down to the very end, that will be those last 6 games are against teams that are lower in the division. Doesn't mean they won't be competitive. Everybody kept their players. They did not trade them off for future lottery picks that usually don't pan out. Let's look at the Mets. The Mets are right there as well. They got that lineup. They have the pitching. I don't think the pitching has performed as well as I expected it to. They've lost 2 in a row to St. Louis. That's surprising. Although they had just won 3 out of 4 against San Francisco at home. Okay, so let's look at who they have to play. Again, it's probably all division. At Pittsburgh, 3. At Philadelphia, St. Louis, more Pittsburgh, more Philadelphia, Montreal. On the road, 4 in Chicago, 3 in Montreal, then 3 at home, and they end at Pittsburgh. If they're within 2 or 3 in this last series, that's going to be tough. They need to get a lead in the series. That's 9 of their last 12 are on the road. So that's a difficult hill to climb. I would still say they're probably third of the, just based on the schedule that I'm looking at, out of those 3. Let's go to Houston, who the Dodgers just split a series with at home. This team is not a great hitting team, but their pitching is very good. They had a nice stretch right here, winning at Pittsburgh, and then 3 others, a game against Atlanta, and the first 2 in a series against St. Louis. They have a lot of road games, especially 3 against San Francisco coming up, then 3 at Cincinnati, then they're home to play San Francisco again. 3 at Atlanta, then 3 against the Dodgers at home, and they end up at Cincinnati. That seems like a difficult hill to climb, but they do have the pitching for it. For the Giants, they have had a rough go, just like the Dodgers. The Dodgers in the last 27 have won 15 and 12, and that's kind of what you're hoping for in each 27-game segment. At least that's what I would like. That eventually equals 90. Both teams have not played well lately. That's 5 of the last 13, which means they've lost 8. They have not played well lately. Now, they did have to go on the road for 8 games, and they won 1 of those. They lost 7 of 8. So that to me says they're not nearly as good on the road. And so let's see what they have left on this schedule. We have some home games here, especially against Houston, and then 3 against Atlanta. Then they go back on the road against Houston. And since that's a tough stretch there. 3, 5, 7, 10 in a row on the road. That'll make or break them, especially this series against the Dodgers. And then they come home for the last 9. So it's fairly even. It's probably a little bit more home games than road games, but they have to make up 4.5 games. And then we come to the Dodgers. That's the thing right here. What I've been preaching probably the last half of the season is let's play 500 ball. We did the hard part. We had that 13-game winning streak. Let's not have a huge losing streak, although this right here, this 4-game losing streak was not good. I mean, we looked at what the Giants had done in the last 13. Dodgers only had 7, although that is above 500. So, in the full 27 games, had about 15 wins. So, they were very streaky. There's a 6-game winning streak. So the rest of the way, play 500 ball here. We got Atlanta coming in, and then Cincinnati, and then you go on the road for San Diego, 3 at Cincinnati, 2 at Atlanta. So that's an 8-game road trip there. Come home for 5. This is a big stretch right here. 6 against Houston and San Francisco. So you want to be in this area with a lead of 3 or more. That's the goal. That would make you feel a little bit safer, at least from my perspective. You get the last 3 games against San Diego at home. Dodgers did sustain some injuries since the last video. Mike Scioscia was injured in the last game. Yeah, I guess he's not going to come up for me. There he is. Well, the injury is not listed here, I guess. Oh, here he is. Injured until 9/9. It's a hand injury. Jose Gonzalez is also out. He's out till the 18th. So playing hurt there. The Giants have lost Mike Lacoste till the middle of September. I think it's the 14th, if I remember correctly. It looks like Kevin Mitchell's got MVP locked up. In a moment, we'll flip over and look at the American League batting leaders. There's a couple other people I'd like to look at as well. Scott Radinsky for the Chicago White Sox has been having a great season as a left-handed reliever. I wanted to look in and see how that's continued. We already looked at Cal Ripken. He's still on his streak, playing every game. Again, don't know if it's every inning of every game. I would seriously doubt that, but definitely every game. So as you see from the standings list, Atlanta is the only team that is eliminated. Although St. Louis is very close, and so is New York. I think that's the plan. As a Dodger manager, I would like to win. I don't think there's going to be a situation where we're so far ahead that we can put in cruise control and just play guys from the reserve squad. The Dodgers have never been able to get, I think, to 6 games ahead in the division. It's just not worked out. There you see Cecil Fielder at 43. He has a chance to get to 50 or 51 still. I think Ricky Henderson has locked up the MVP. So let's take a look at Scott. I think the last time I looked, he had given up 3 hits against left-handers the whole season. Let's see if that's still... Well, it won't be exactly the same, I'm sure. There's Scott with his 0.54 ERA. Against lefties, he's given up 4 hits and 51 at-bats for a .078 average. Very impressive. Look at his pitching ERA plus, 7.37. So, good job there. I'm excited to play this last 27 games, win or lose. I'm trying to balance, I'm trying to keep the roster as healthy as possible. I know there's going to be injuries going to happen. The last 2 weeks, I would love to be so far ahead that in the last 2 weeks play nobody and just cruise into the playoffs. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to come down to the very end. Again, I still like the Dodgers' chances if we can just avoid a long losing streak. We've not played our best, though, in the second half of the season. The hitting has just not continued. Still averaging about 4.9 runs a game, but the pitching has not been as good either. The defense has gone down. All 3 elements have not played as well. But all things being equal, I like being 4.5 games up. So the next video, we'll play some games. Take you down the stretch. Watch these other series, these other divisions. See who wins. and then we'll see the playoffs. So just wanted to give you an update. Last update until the end of the season. This will be an exciting end. Nobody has clinched anything yet. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Missed It by How Much.